Hey guys, Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist. One of my final days here in Bogota. I'm really loving Colombia here for the reason that I never knew we had so many fans in this part of the world. Just every time I go and do a video here, this is the third ad hoc video without a videographer I've done in the last month or so. Every single time while I'm making the video, some guy comes up and says, oh, I love your videos. And so it's really been nice. Thanks to all of our fans all around the world. There are 278 days left until Nomad Capitalist Live. It is our first live conference in nearly 5 years. You asked for it. You asked for it. I said, I'm not doing any more conferences. People said, hey, how can we get together? How can we meet? We're not ready to hire you. We're not at the level to hire you yet. We'd like, but what can we do? Nomad Capitalist Live. We've sold out more tickets than any of our first 3 conferences. We have the majority of our free hotel rooms already given away. So if you want to come, you want to hang out for 4 days, we've got a free hotel room deal. You can come and go to nomadcapitalist.com/live, get all the details, get your free hotel room for all 4 nights. Great lineup of speakers. Now, here's the interesting thing about Bogota, by the way. Very leisurely, calm people. They wait for 2 seconds in traffic, like pulling into a supermarket. It's chaos. So I actually recorded the whole video on the street. Now I'm doing it a second time because you just couldn't hear anything at the end. These people are going crazy. Let's talk about Brexit. Boris Johnson, big win in the UK. My thought on Brexit, see, there you go. My thought on Brexit all along, I'm not a Brexit scholar by any means. If you're looking for scholarly insights here, you're in the wrong place, but I'm gonna tell you a few things from the Nomad Capitalist perspective. If you wanna live in a democracy and you have a vote, to me that's the vote. Now my personal interest would be, it'd be nice to have the option in the future to get an EU, bloody hell, to get an EU passport, and then just go and live in London. But to me, it's like, here's the thing that happens in these parts of the world, these high-tech countries. They go around telling you how they've got this brilliant system that no one else has. They figured it out. Every time, I grew up in the US where every time a president was elected, they're like, this is the orderly transition of power. Well, if your system's so great, then listen, you didn't win, but your system worked. People voted, get out. And I've got a lot of friends on social media this morning who are very sad. But listen, you voted. And this is my number one complaint about this system is, yes, a lot of idiots who don't know what they're doing get to vote in your elections. And that kind of complicates the process. But that's the system that you've liked, and that's the system that you agreed on. So 2 things that I think are important to note. Number 1, if you are the 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneur that we talk about, and you're a UK citizen, I think you just got, you're on track for an advantage. Here's why. I read a lot of these policy papers from the OECD and all the other high-tax organizations. Fun fact, by the way, did you know that some of the folks who work at those organizations pay no tax? It's true. They go around and encourage you and I to pay a fortune in tax, but they and their salaries are not taxed, some of them. So I read these papers. There's a big flurry of stuff coming out recently about taxes on multinationals, companies like Netflix and all these other multinationals, and saying, hey, you've got to pay something if you're doing business here. We're not going to let you, they're just further cracking down on a bunch of stuff. Everyone must pay a minimum tax. Guilty in the United States on corporations, everyone must pay a minimum tax. I've been saying for a little while now, that is the trend, I think, especially in these Anglo countries, where, can you imagine a politician, especially a European politician, I'm sorry, but just seriously, our values as Europeans are that everyone should pay at least 11%, and if you don't, then you'll pay the rest to us. And so, can you imagine, European values, you always say Australian, all these, it's the values. What's interesting is I share most of the values of these countries, except I don't want to give them half my money. And so, if you're a Canadian, if you're a UK citizen, if you are Australian, whatever, I think there's a chance that it's going to become more difficult for you to move overseas to low tax or zero tax countries, because I think there'll be some kind of backdoor thing at some point. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 15 years in the future. But eventually, there's just too much competition coming up. As I always say, when I was born, where would you have moved? I'm 35 years old. Okay, where would you have moved? Would you have moved to Malaysia? Of course not. Panama? Probably not. Colombia? Surely not. Right? Almost all the countries we talk about now, you would not have moved there 35. You would have moved to Georgia in 1984. Are you kidding me? It was 1984. And so I think the competition is going to catch up and they will start doing this system. I don't know if it'll be the US style taxation where you just pay. Now, I talked to a guy from Congressional Quarterly, I think it was, this morning, and did an interview, and he said, oh, well, what's the point of leaving the U.S. if you can't save tax? You can save a lot of tax. You just can't pay zero, and you've still got to fill out all the stupid forms. And then you have all these other restrictions. And so, I think that that's the future, is more countries doing stuff where it's like, hey, you got to pay us something. Unless you're paying somewhere else. And so I think Canada, Australia would probably top that list, honestly. Maybe France. I'm not sure if the EU would come together as a bloc. I imagine there's some countries like Ireland that would push back against that. I think that a post-Brexit UK is much lower on that list. I think it's a pretty open place, and that's not the kind of thing they're going to do. They're going to remain very international, and they're not going to do that kind of thing. All my British friends around the world are welcomed by their embassy. I don't think that's going to change. No, I mean, so are the Canadians, stuff like that. I mean, obviously, U.S., Russians, not so welcome at their embassy. The Brits are having bloody high tea at their embassies overseas, honestly. They pay no tax, and they get free tea, right? In the U.S., you pay, and you get no tea. So I think that, if you want to be a nomad capitalist, this is going to be easier for you because you're not going to have to deal with some of the EU stuff. There could be a block-wide directive at some point. You see more and more countries around the world folding. Barbados just got rid of its two-tiered offshore tax system earlier this year. Other countries are just getting out of the business entirely, especially in the Caribbean. Obviously, the UK has more political might than, St. Lucia. But the trend is people are kind of goose-stepping along with the OECD. And so that's number one. Number two, the thing has been, every time like something in the news happens, we have a big spike on our website. And so when Trump got elected, there were various events in India that happened, and also when Brexit happened, we had something like, 100 or 200,000 people on our site in the next 24 hours. I remember being in Spain and watching it. It was like incredible. And they were all looking for other passports. Now, if your goal is to study or work in the European Union, you're going to have a problem. Potentially. Well, I guess we'll see how it plays out. If you are a 6, 7, 8 figure entrepreneur, you're going to have an American passport now. You're going to have a Canadian passport. Maybe there'll be some kind of special carve out, like UK citizens get a special deal going to Hong Kong. Maybe there'll be something like that where you get some extra privileges over an American. But, to me, by and large, that's what it's going to be. So, if the goal is to live in the European Union, there's so many ways to do it. For people like me who don't have EU citizenship, and potentially don't want it, you can get a freelancer visa. Now, that's not a very tax-friendly way to do it, but, if you just want to work there, maybe you're willing to pay. You can get golden visas. There are all kinds of different ways to get in the European Union. Now, are there that many ways to naturalize? Yeah, a lot of the golden visas, for example, are difficult to naturalize unless you live there. But if your goal is to live in the European Union, then there you go. So I think that, what you're going to see is, if you want to live in the EU, you can. There'll be plenty of ways to do that. If you have Irish ancestry, that's the first place I would look, or some other ancestry in the EU. That could be an easy place for British citizens or anyone else who wants to live in the EU. Other than that, I talk to folks who have some money. Golden visas, I think, are a decent option. There are other options like, freelancer visas that sometimes work out when you can pair that up with a tax exemption, like in Portugal, Italy, etc. But I would ask myself, I think that's the question you have to ask is, do you want to live somewhere full time and pay tax there? Or do you want to make a large investment and have the flexibility in a place like Portugal? Or do you just want to use your basically US or Canadian or Australian passport to go to Europe like everyone else and spend up to half the year there? Honestly, I think maybe people in the UK, every time I go to the UK, and every time all my friends go to the UK, it's always, they ask a lot of questions when you go there. The EU, even in, like I go to Amsterdam, for example, they're like, what are you here for? Yeah, just, checking out the shops. Cool, have a nice day. They're really cool. And so the UK has always been more strict, and Anglo countries in general are more strict, and so I wonder if people aren't maybe assuming that for other countries. Like the EU, like if you go to the EU as a non-EEA national, that you'll have that problem. I've never had that problem in the EU. So the bottom line is, if you are a successful person, I think this is good news for you. I think you're eliminating some future taxation risks. You're giving yourself more options to be a nomad capitalist. You are not going to see a huge blow to your passport. And if you do, and if the blow is the one thing that you're looking for, that EU access full-time, plenty of ways to do it. If you can't get citizenship by descent, then you get set up with an investment visa, you get a freelancer visa, you do whatever, and yes, maybe you'll have to pay some tax. But as you know, that is the way they do things in the EU. They like their tax. And so to me, the two kind of go part and parcel if you're not making a large investment. Obviously, Ireland, by the way, also has an immigrant investment program, not cheap compared to the EU programs. But if you want, and obviously, you know, if you're from the UK, you have kind of special access to Ireland. That could be an option for folks who want to get into the EU as well. So I think really not much to worry about for successful folks. If your goal is to study in the European Union, you know, you might pay a little bit more. But overall, I don't see a lot of the chaos that people in the UK are talking about right now with Brexit.